This episode is sponsored by Appian, a technology leader in driving digital-first insurance transformation. With Appian's low-code automation platform, you can build enterprise apps and workflows rapidly in an agile environment. You look very professional, especially with the shirt, the cufflinks and everything. And you live in Williamsburg, so you don't give me the vibe of a hipster. How does it work?
Well, the way it works, Gilad, is I'm the contrarian of the contrarian. So it's being the ironic to the ironic, right? And I like to be a bit of a trendsetter when it comes to the vibes and the fashion. So I'm trying to set a trend here of, counteracting the being ironic around me. But having said that, I do enjoy my time here in Williamsburg. It's a lot of fun.
Now, are you a Justin Bieber fan, or is he a fan of yours? Because he just moved to the next door building, right? Your neighbors.
It turns out, yes. It turns out I moved to the neighboring building to Justin Bieber. Now, I'm not particularly a fan, although I do respect him as a musician, I have to say. And I would be remiss if I wouldn't say that I did analyze and I did learn some of his songs just from a purely respectful musician's perspective.
Well, they work very hard to be so talented, and it's great. Listen, I wish I had those talents. But all the jokes aside, let's talk a little bit of what brings us together, and that's insurance, actually data, or to be precise, structured data. You are with ACORD. So for the folks who don't know what ACORD is, which will be very, very surprising, can you give us a little bit of background about what is ACORD, the background of ACORD, and where are we going with it?
Yeah, you could really start at the beginning. We were thinking of 1970 when ACORD was founded, really by large carriers and brokers coming together to think about how do we reduce the expense ratio. Because back then, obviously, Gilad, as you go out and buy insurance, either through an agent or a broker, you would have to fill out these forms. And the fact of the matter back then was every carrier had a different form. So the idea was, let's be smart about this. Let's standardize these forms and thereby cut out some costs, come together. And ACORD was really tasked with the facilitation of folks coming together back then and, developing these standards, these forms. Obviously, over time, the paper forms turned to electronic forms. And now we have what we call XML messages, which enable you to electronically trade across counterparties within the insurance stakeholder ecosystem.
Ken, we talked a little bit about the solution that you have for JSON, and you brought that up. Do you guys support JSON? Do you have an API that can help something that we all, not we, but developers love and adore?
Yeah, absolutely. We have what we call the next gen digital standards as a standard set that comes with the membership benefits and obviously has been developed together with our members. And these also bring you JSON-based standards and obviously powered by the power of APIs, which are so prevalent in the market.
The challenge that I have with the conversation that we had so far is that I didn't even manage to introduce you properly. So I gave people a little bit of an insight about where you live and the fact that you are a hipster of the hipster. And by that double irony, you dress up in a nice custom shirt with cufflinks and everything. And apparently you are Justin Bieber's neighbor. And we already, jumped into ACORD and the elements of how do we actually push the insurance industry forward. So Ken, do you mind giving a little bit people, a little bit about your background and what do you do for ACORD?
I'll be delighted to. I actually like to argue that I have a bit of a different background. So on the personal side, I am Japanese and German. I grew up in Tokyo. I went to a German school in Tokyo for K through high school, followed by my undergrad in Japan. Came over to the US for grad school. And on the professional side, also a bit of an insurance outsider. So my background is in large cap private equity, as well as investment banking. Have a bit of a stint on the fintech startup world as well. And insurance was always sort of a sector that was different to me. So it was, I mean, it's commonly said among insurance folks that they stumbled into insurance. Very much the case for me as well. During my startup days, I had the opportunity to meet our current CEO, and he really convinced me to come over to ACORD and make some transformational digitization work happen, because it really seemed like this is in 4 years ago. It really seemed like we were at the cusp of something major happening. Obviously, you have legacy issues, both sort of on the cultural side as well as the system side, probably interlinked in a way. That as a backdrop, and then just digitization occurring across all sorts of sectors. And now you probably hear this on every episode, but now with the pandemic, even more of an accelerator to drive digitization across industries. It's just been going quicker and quicker now in terms of the want and the need to drive out efficiencies, optimize processes, and just get rid of the paper-based trading as well.
So now that you answered the most burning question that all the listeners have, which is, what is his accent? Because if they're not watching the video, they can even, right? If they are just listening to the podcast and not watching the video cast, they are like, where do I place? It's better enough that they need to hear my accent. And again, I'm Israeli, not French. It's brilliant, the background and how you grew. And usually it's the other way, right? You go from startups to investments, and then somehow you reach insurance, and you went sort of a combination of all of them, and you bring many interesting tools into the space of insurance and the innovation. So what are you working on nowadays?
Where do we start, Gilad?
The beginning.
At the beginning, I really wear a lot of hats. Obviously, it's just the privilege of being at the center of the ecosystem. ACORD is owned by its members, so we count 36,000 plus participants among our ACORD community, among our ACORD family, that have really embraced the ACORD standards and this thought about let's further the industry. So me as an outsider coming in, there's just so many things you can do. Obviously, on the strategic point, we want to drive digitization from within. So this is by working very closely with our members. We partner up with the solution providers, the service providers, the system integrators, the big consultancies of the world to really drive the adoption of digitization. So I'm very busy with being on the calls with the big brand names that fall under this bucket and that also want to make a contribution to insurance. The way we go to market is obviously we provide the quote unquote utilities, which now our partners can take, put services and solutions on top of it, and drive those to go to market. So partnership model, very important for us. Obviously, we work very closely with the insurance organizations as well. Aon and Zurich, very good case in point. They have been our pilot partner in putting the data exchange into production. It's fully live in production now. We started with a use case around the post-bind premium accounting reconciliation problem, where the issue today is you essentially have brokers and carriers where in the general ledgers have these discrepancies among the policy information, their invoice information, their payments, and so forth. The way they're handling this problem today is very manual, very old school. Pick up the phone, write an email across to each other, look at their respective systems, try to reconcile. Well, first try to see where the discrepancies are and then try to reconcile. So it's a very painful way how they handle this. We actually sat in a meeting with leadership at Aon and Zurich a couple of years back. They raised this issue and said, well, is there anything we could do with you, ACORD? And this is sort of really the philosophical way we like to develop our solutions. We collaboratively work with our members, identify real pain points in the industry, and then work together very closely with the solution that now is the resolution to this problem. So it's a very great success story I always enjoy telling, because it's just ideal in the way we like to do these things. And obviously we're now very busy and getting the additional participants on board, because again, the entire industry should be on this, right? And only when the entire industry is on this, then everyone can get the benefit from the network effects.
It's very interesting. Sorry. I love that point, because you're in a position that you have a very wide or very broad view of the industry and how it works. Yeah. And this is great. And especially that example of Aon and Zurich, I would call it the back office of the back office. Most of the startups who introducing innovation into the industry, most of them are focusing on a very specific problem. It will be distribution, it will be new risk handling or management. But here you're dealing with the exception of a New York-based startup that is dealing with subrogation that I know.
Yeah.
But most of them are avoiding dealing with accounting, dealing with payments. I'll give a shout out to Andrew from Exactuals. But and One Inc., they also trying to figure that out. But in terms of the accounting, the reports and all that stuff, it's still so much behind, because it's not even core system, it's the ledgers. And before someone is going to jump with a comment, oh, we need to do DeFi and blockchain, wait a second, those are technical solutions to a problem that we can have. Fostering innovation, you're actually going to have another innovation championship soon.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
You know, the mission of ACORD is obviously furthering the industry, and we do this through our standards that we've been traditionally been the facilitator, the only facilitator within the insurance, the global insurance, ecosystem among P&C, life and annuities, and reinsurance. Now we have these software-based solutions that help that as well. But fundamentally, it's all about people. So we see ourselves as the facilitator to bring the various stakeholders, and let me tell you, there are a lot of stakeholders within the insurance ecosystem, bring all those different parties together and, have the right conversations. So one form is we have a R&D arm through which we produce thought leadership studies, a lot around digitization, digital customer experience, value creation. So really, again, benefit of being at the eco center of the ecosystems center, and thereby furthering how we think about the industry, how we further it. Another form is the annual innovation challenge, which is called the ACORD InsurTech Innovation Challenge. We are in our 6th year this year. Again, we're doing it globally. There is a New York leg, there is a London leg, and the opportunity really is for insurtechs to submit their insurtech idea. Then there will be a pitch off in front of a panel of experts. The winner will be getting, various prizes, but most importantly, bragging rights and sort of the promotional value. So we are open for applications as we speak. You can find more about this at acordchallenge.org. Deadline is coming up soon, so I do encourage everyone to submit their ideas.
Yeah, bragging rights, it's so true. Companies need that.
Yeah. Well, I highly encourage folks to look at our activities. I can tell you we are just tremendously busy working with our partners, prospective partners, and also obviously the carriers and brokers, the reinsurers, the various industry associations as well, to think about digitization. So I encourage people to check out our website, to check out ACORD, to check out ACORD Solutions Group, the subsidiary, or just reach out to me and have a conversation how we may help you join the ACORD family, drive digitization and further the industry. Finally bring it to the 21st century, because I think we're a little overdue here.
No, that's a very positive approach because, and especially the initiation of letting the startups to be part of the ACORD family. And
Yeah.
I just saw Fargo, the fourth season. I was like, it's the family. You need to bring those startups into the ACORD family. I'm not suggesting that you are a mafia or anything like that,
No.
but it's the family.
I mean, the partnership model is very dear to us. We obviously are working with a bunch of people. Interestingly, I would also say that oftentimes the conversations get started by inbound requests. So people hear about us, they want to learn more, they reach out to us, a little problem then gets identified, and then we work on these together in a collaborative fashion.
Let me ask you the same question that I'm asking every person who comes on the podcast. And that's basically sort of the final question. And it's more about, can you give us a recommendation that you picked up in the past 18 months? So, it can be a book, a TV show, a life hack, anything that, we should know about.
Yeah. The pandemic was really an opportunity for me, at least, to take a step back, dissect sort of your day, relook at the habits that you have, right? I mean, I was kind of forcefully, and I presume a majority of the folks listening or watching this were also forcefully to be doing this exercise. For me, at least, and for a number of folks, sort of the living space got converged with the working space. So I was myself in a small apartment in Manhattan, really small square footage that was really now my place where I had to do everything. So that forcefully kind of just led me to defragment everything, look at it, and reconsider the habits that I have. Now, there's a very interesting and fascinating book that I've actually had read in the past, but I do like to reread books. As you change, as you mature, as you grow, seeing the books and reading the books, there's so much more you can learn out of them. So a book called Daily Rituals by Mason Currey, last name Currey. Very interesting. He goes through essentially creative people throughout history, be it artists, composers, writers, and he chronicles their daily habits. So he goes, Gilad wakes up at 6 a.m., has coffee, goes for a run, and goes through their day. So obviously you have sort of the funky episodes. For example, Beethoven, every morning his breakfast consisted of coffee. And by the way, it had to be 60 coffee beans to the count, which he counted himself every morning by himself. But I think what's more interesting were the patterns you saw throughout these people. So there were really three major things that I saw. A, folks tend to do the creative / needle moving significant work in the morning. That was a very common pattern you saw. B, folks tended to have a habit of doing a Spaziergang, as we call it in German, which really loosely translates into going for a walk without a destination, just for the sake of taking a walk. And third, folks tended to have a pretty clear, determined habit of spending time with the family and friends at night. And they were quite strict about these habits. So I myself looked at my habits too, and I really re-emphasized the 3 M's, as I like to call them. First M.
They are?
First M, meditation. So I meditate at least twice a day, every single day. If anything, during the pandemic, I sometimes even ramped that up to 4 or 5 times a day. I mean, obviously, cultivating presence not only helps you with being blissful and feeling more content, but let me tell you, it is also a bit of a cheat code in terms of performance, be it for work or for other things. Second M, music. Music has always been with me, but it was really great opportunity to spend more time with my electric guitar, with my acoustic guitar. Again, cultivating creativity, I believe, is very much key in the dynamic insurtech world. Third M, MMA. So I partly blame my karateka / boxing fanatic dad for maybe subconsciously instilling the interest in martial arts to me. I mean, I grew up with him watching Pride and K1 all the time. All his friends were fighters. So I kind of grew up in that milieu. But during the pandemic, gave me more time and opportunity to even more follow MMA fighters out there. And for me, really cultivated the virtues of humility, hard work, and sort of really strong work ethics. So those were sort of the 3 M's I've really taken up in the pandemic and re-emphasized more, made them part of my daily habits.
Now, may I ask you one question? I can't really see from here, but which guitars do you have there in the background?
That is an Yamaha acoustic guitar and a Fujigen electric guitar in the shape of Gibson. So back home in Japan, back then I used to be part of a music circle. We rented a music studio every month for 5 or 6 hours, just jamming along. And these guys were instrument fanatics. So they tended to use these shops where you can really build a guitar from scratch, picking out the wood, picking out all the components. And one of those stores was a company called Fujigen. And they use just the highest quality of components. So that's my little baby, my Fujigen Gibson style Les Paul guitar.
Oh, those are heavy. I remember my first Les Paul. That was a heavy guitar.
Yes.
And then I switched to, I had like this lightweight Ibanez, which needless to say, it was like, it's a different style of, and I never managed to get the Stratocaster. I don't know why. It was like the in-between, because the neck was almost like a classic guitar, but it wasn't. But it was, sadly to say, almost 30 years ago. So, yeah,
and what's fascinating about the weight, the shape of the body, and as you say, the neck size and the thickness, it all translates into different sound. So with this heavy guy back there, the sound is very round and very wholesome and very filling. Whereas with an Ibanez, it could be more shrill. The Stratocasters tend to be a little bit more lighter, so more used in like lighter rock and funk and so forth. So it's just fascinating how one thing converts and translates into another.
Now, I was supposed to close this episode and say thank you very much and it's been great, but today's Friday, the 23rd, the ceremony of the Olympics, the Tokyo Olympics was today. Did you manage to see it?
I actually caught about 30 minutes this morning when I was on the elliptical and doing my ab workout. And let me tell you, it got me a little teary-eyed because I thought it was quite well put together, given the circumstances and given the context of what's going on in the background here.
Yeah.
And obviously I missed going home to Japan as well. So that was a bit of a driver as well.
Of course. And with this solemn, nostalgic and emotional note, Ken, thank you very, very much for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Gilad-san, the pleasure was all mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.